What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Bed Boys, your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian,
I'm Brian.
and today we are the Bed Boys with a very special guest on the show. We got Connor Rooney in the house. Roon, how's it going?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing good. So, as always, our guest episodes, we like to keep them pretty chill, conversational, but it's going to be a really good episode. Roon has a lot of, I would say, unique experience, especially compared to a lot of our other guests that we've had on the show. We've had a lot of other like strength coaches, gym owners, stuff like that on the show. But I think his path to kind of where he's at today is very unique in the sense of, he's gotten a lot more knowledge and like the skill acquisition side of things. So I'm looking forward to kind of digging into that. But first off, let's get some drinks going here. I'm gonna start off with a heavy hitter here. I got a C4 Ultimate, so it's like the super powered caffeine one, and this is a fruit punch flavor. Now, normally fruit punch is not a super good flavor of energy drink, if I'm being honest, personal preference, but C4 usually doesn't miss with the flavors, so we will see. And the can does look pretty sick, so I'm going to be redlining for this episode while this guy drops some knowledge on us.
I went C4 as well.
Oh, wow.
So, I don't know if we were both just thinking that. I almost did a bombsicle or a rocket pop yesterday with it being 4th of July. I was like, gotta go for America. But then when I went in to grab them, it was everything we've already reviewed. So I was like, well, if there's nothing new, then find something new. And I don't know if we've reviewed this on the channel, but I got it, the Mango Fuego C4.
Oh, a little spicy mango action.
Little spicy mango action. I know we've done the 3D spicy mango, which ended up being really good. But I got the Mango Fuego C4. Pretty cool looking can. Little mangoes on the side. My lights are terrible, but Rooney, you got an energy drink for us today?
A little more basic for me, but just blue slush Alani. So getting whited out there, but basic, but it'll do the job. 200 milligrams.
200 milligrams to the dome. All right, boys. Well, just kind of getting it started out here. Roon, why don't you just tell the people kind of your path to where you got to today through SNC. You can really start as early as you want and, take as much time as you want. But what's the Rooney story, the evolution to where you are today?
Yeah, I would say a little more unconventional than most that I've met in the field, at least. So, started out, kind of played all sports growing up, focused on baseball and football throughout high school. Never really had any desire to do anything except like play professionally, which obviously didn't end up doing, but kind of led me to where I'm at now. So played through high school. While I was in high school, guy that lived down the road from me actually owned a lot of successful like chiropractic clinics around the area. And by the time I was leaving high school, they had like 20 to 25 locations around the county and the surrounding counties. So that's kind of what grasped my interest first, actually. So started kind of like shadowing him at his practice and everything. And then going into college, I was undeclared, but I was kind of leaning between like chiropractic or actually like the criminal justice field. That's kind of where my dad's in. Kept in touch with the chiropractor throughout the early stages of college. First 2 years, they would actually have like a huge clinic down in Clearwater Beach where I was going to college. So they would bring me over there. I'd get to meet everyone, and it seemed like a pretty cool field. But like I would go to these seminars, and I would just be absolutely falling asleep, listen to like everyone presenting on all their topics, and it was just hours and hours. And I was like, I don't think this is for me. Like it was good money, it was helping people, but I didn't think that was it for me. Which kind of led into like after my freshman summer, I went and trained at Cressy Sports Performance over in Jupiter. And I really enjoyed that. It was kind of my first look into like actual like sports performance for athletes, beyond just like the standard camp level that we were seeing like when I was in high school. So spent my first 2 summers of college training at Cressy's, and then after my third, I actually flew out to Driveline in Seattle for the first time. Started training there after my junior year of college, and that was kind of the first time I was like, oh crap, this is like awesome. Like if I could do this as a profession, this would be sick. But then on the other end, I'm like, I also kind of want to make some money too. So like at that point, I was kind of torn. I was still Cairo, S&C. Played baseball throughout college, and then during my senior year, I was kind of wasn't getting too many looks professionally. I did not have a great college career by any means. I was hurt a lot. Um, but I was very interested in like how can I get better, and that's when like I'd go back to my dorm room and I was watching videos on like Stan Efforting Rhino rants back in like 2015, and like old Mike O'Hearn videos, like whatever I could do to just like I don't know how I can get stronger. How is that going to help me throw a baseball? I'm reading blogs written by Kyle Bodie at the time, Eric Cressy. So it's all kind of just like leading me to this path of like really big trial and error of like me trying all these things out in the gym, but it was always with the intention to like get better as an athlete, never to coach. But my senior year at college, actually, I was sitting in class and I was basically when I transferred, I lost a ton of credits. So my last 2 years of college, I had to take a lot of classes that I wasn't really interested in, weren't part of my major. But I was in this like political science class, and I was bored as heck. So I was like going on, I think it was Statcast at the time, Baseball Savant, and I was just looking at like guys that throw hard and like what do they commonly do. So I went into like a Google spreadsheet, took all their velos, their names, their heights, their weights, kind of looked that up wherever I could get it. I did like release extension, release height, body weight, average fastball velo, and I just put it all into this sheet and then I color coded it. And it was pretty cool because you got like averages of all those different columns and stuff like that. And like I found nothing, but it was pretty cool just for me to visualize. So I actually sent it to a buddy of mine who I had met while I was training at Driveline. He was a trainer at the time. His name's Rob Hill. He now works for the Dodgers. And I was like, hey, man, what do you got on this? He was like, I don't know, but like just post it. And I was like, what do you mean post it? I said, it doesn't show anything. He's like, no, but it shows that like you can do like you're interested in things and you can, sort through data and work hard. So I was like, okay, I'll post it. And it like blew up on Twitter, got like over like 1,000 likes, 1,000 retweets at the time. And then I actually started getting like DMs on Twitter from like different college coaches around the country. And like, hey, we got this GA spot available. Like, would you be interested? And I was like, oh crap. Like that'd be way more cool than like throwing 250K down the drain and going to Cairo school for the next 3 years. And like, if I try it and I hate it, then like I could always go back to Cairo school, but I probably can't get these offers back later on, or at least not as easy. So I had a bunch of like NAIAs, D2s, D3s. So I was like, okay, like let me just send this out to everybody, send my resume out. So like I sat in study hall for like the next few days and just kind of emailed every school that I thought was like worth it, like anywhere I thought was like going to get me better or anywhere I'd want to consider living for the next 2 years. Ended up getting an offer from Coastal Carolina to be a graduate assistant working with the pitchers and the S&C department. So I graduated in 2019 in May and then started up at Coastal in July. So I was there like 8 weeks later. Was actually at Coastal for like 2 months, and then I saw an opening at Driveline. And like that's kind of where I always wanted to end up. Like once I trained at Driveline, I was like, this is the best place on earth. Like especially when they were in that old little dusty, dirty gym back in Kent. Like they had 3 different little buildings within this giant industrial park too, which was awesome. Like they had a warehouse, they had the lab, then they had the gym, and I was like, this place is sick. I love the people who work there. I love the content they're putting out. So I got that offer, and then I took it and ran with it. Like I think I had the interview on a Monday. And the guy was like, all right, can you be here by the next Monday? And I was living in Myrtle Beach. I was like, yes. So talked to my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. And we were like, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we did it. We broke our lease and then literally trailered her car to my truck. And then we drove 56 hours from Myrtle to Kent, Washington. Slept in a Walmart parking lot the night before because the apartment building was closed and we couldn't get our keys. And then the next morning we got our keys and I started up work that same day. So it was kind of a crazy process. And then worked there for, that was 3.5 years until I got into pro ball. So yeah, a little bit more unconventional, but.
So when you were, first off, obviously super cool to just kind of say like, screw it, I'm betting on it. I'm just going to go with it and roll with it, especially like getting rid of, things that you did in your head. They were just things that you did. that you just kind of worked your way into a new career, new job path, all these different things with your sheet. That's just super cool. But if you don't mind me asking, because when I was we obviously we like to do a little bit of research on some of the coaches that come on here. When you were at Coastal, it was like a hybrid kind of role, correct? It was
Yeah,
like a
so the role was set to work with both the pitching staff and the S&C department. The timeline I was there, I didn't do as much work on the pitching side just because the pitchers weren't throwing. It was the middle of the summer, so a lot more was spent on like physical development. It was like block one of the off season for them. So we did some basic like game review, kind of like game strategy planning and stuff like that, and then some very basic mechanical work. But most of the time while I was there was spent on the S&C side.
okay. And then even to the extent moving over to Driveline, you know, that's kind of a similar kind of role where it's all encompassing. You have the physical development, the skill acquisition. You know, you're working through all pieces of it. So you've always kind of been in this more hybrid esque role, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, even going into it, like I kind of wanted to be more on like the pitching side too. And that's kind of like still to this day, I'm kind of split 50-50. Like I have a lot of interest in both. And like I always, like I wanted to be a pitching trainer. So I was like, okay, I'll do that at Coastal. And then Driveline had a job opened up. Oh, I want to do pitching, but I just need to get in any way possible. So like I'll take a S&C spot and hope that I can get into the pitching spot. And then same thing when I got into pro ball, it was like kind of want to be more on the skill side. So like my first job actually when I was hired in pro ball, I was a rehab hitting coach actually, which I've like limited to no background in hitting besides hitting in high school. But in terms of like how to get guys better, like aside from just basic periodization and like knowing how the body works, I did not know much about hitting, but it taught me a lot, and I got to work a lot with the pitchers too, and then ended up moving a little bit more into like a full-time role just with some staff changes that were made that season. But yeah, it was really cool, and I think it's definitely made me a much better strength coach having that experience as the with the skill side, and then especially when I go and I work on the skill, like the like confidence you have knowing some of like the raw S&C terminology and just like how the body works and then how to periodize training over time. I mean, it's really not that different. And I think if a lot of skill coaches sat down and just learned periodization and like basic S&C philosophy, I think it would help them a ton. And I think they would think they'd have to go to like squat school and learn how to spot guys and all that. And it's like, that's not the case at all.
With kind of like your specific role, I'm in a little bit of a similar one. Like obviously on the skill side and on the actual S&C side, doing both. Do you think that's a betterment and like a progression of the field that a good sports performance coach can kind of strive to be in that unique role and make it more of not such a unique role, but something that is broader and scalable at size?
Yeah, no, I do. Like I really I love like the old school track and field model, and that's like something that I aspire to end up doing one day. Is where it's like you have your athletes and you're everything. You're their massage therapist, you're their physical therapist, they're their strength coach, their skill coach. Um, but I do think even just with like staff restrictions that you're seeing at universities at the NCAA level, like I think that's where a lot of teams are going to have to turn. Where if you can have a strength coach who's just as good, if not better, than most assistant or full time pitching coaches around the country. Like now you have three full time pitching coaches on staff for the price of two. And like you also probably have a really good strength coach who not only understands the demands on the physical side, but they also demands on the skill side. And I think it's a lot easier to kind of piece together the puzzle that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I feel like you're starting to see that a little bit more. Like the person that comes to mind is like Corey Schlesinger for me. Kind of a little bit more like he's like the performance coach, but also more a little bit intertwined with like skill development. I know like when he was at Texas, he was technically like he was like an assistant coach, right? Like he wasn't, he was like director of performance and then like assistant coach. So it's definitely basketball a little bit. And I think you're seeing it a lot more like in baseball and then a little bit in track. It's a little bit more common in track, I think, just because it's like, we've talked about this before. It's like the sport of training, like the training transfers, like you can tell if it transfers or not because the times get better or they don't. It's very objective. What do you think is like the biggest thing kind of holding coaches back, regardless of sport, like kind of diving into more of like the skill acquisition side? Is it because like they feel like they can't, or like is it like a lack of want?
Yeah, I think I kind of feel like a lot of them either like I don't have time to do it or like I can't at this point. Like what helped me the most was simply just doing the task. Like I wanted to play professionally so bad, so like and with where I was at, like looking back on it now, it's like man, I was kind of stupid. Like I was not good, but like it kept me pushing to like I need to throw 95 miles an hour and like I'm going to learn any way possible. But like I was taking all of this information that I was getting from different facilities or different trainers, and I was just applying it to myself. So like basically up until this last off season, like I continued throwing as if I was a player. Just one because I simply really like to do it, like I enjoy to throw, but it also taught me a ton about how certain movements feel when you go into the weight room and like you just had a velo day 2 days ago and you were ripping balls at 100 plus or like at least trying to, and then you come in and you have an upper body day and it's like oh man, like my forearm is feeling it, like maybe I can't barbell bench today, or like how do I find a workaround. But like I think most coaches, like you don't need to play professional, you don't need to play in a league, but just like practice a sport and try to get really good at it, and like whether that's even just hitting off a tee every day, but like you'll start to just learn things about what the players are feeling and like things they're saying. I think when they come into the weight room and you're like, before you're like, just cut it out. You're gonna do this. But now it's like, hey, like I understand where that guy's coming from. I understand why he feels that way. Maybe it's not a total switch, but it's just like I think the players also respect when they see like, hey, you really care about my sport. Like I see you out there trying. Like I see you throwing. Like I can't tell how many times players were just like, dude, that's so awesome. I didn't know you did, and then it's like you could see the light bulb switch of like the buy-in come in of like, oh, okay, like he's not just a weights guy, like he really cares about the sport, and like that's what the players want to hear. It's like even if they love the weight room, like they're in there because they want to get better and like be better on the field. So like I think like just even if it's 10 minutes a week, like or 10 minutes a day, I'm saying like just practice, like go shoot hoops, go if you're working in basketball, like if you're working in baseball, just go row for 10 minutes a day and like try different things. And I think that's like the biggest thing a lot of guys can pick up is just like just simply try practicing one of the sports. Like we all did that when we were younger, and people grow out of it.
Do you think a little bit, if we look at it from this like the NCAA perspective, do you think a little bit is hindered by the current NCAA model where you may have, 5 or 6 teams that you're training inside the weight room, and that lack of time or availability to expand that knowledge across, 5 different sports and be that for 5 different sports hinders the development or the progression of that coach to maybe get into this, you know, what we would kind of think of as like the utopian role of you are truly sports performance, because it's all the whole thing is a performance, whether it's skill acquisition or physical development. It's been siloed for so long that we forget about the fact that the over encompassing product is, are they more prepared and better capable to do their sport, which is kind of what you're talking about right now in your role of make this entire product better and everyone's bought it on the same mission, but now I can kind of, lean one way or the other and kind of maneuver where I need to go. But if you got to do that with 5 different teams, it becomes more limiting.
Yeah, and I think like at the end of the day, like you're still building like general physical qualities regardless, and I think like that's the meat and potatoes of what you need to do across all sports. But like I think that last little bit, and like in the collegiate setting, it's a little different too, even in the professional, because like you have the skill coaches there, so you can kind of stay in that general physical space a lot longer. But like I, it's just in like I have a fire in me to want to do both, and like I think both complement each other so well. Like I think that like my knowledge of the physical side really helps the skill side and vice versa. But yeah, like you have 5 sports. Like I don't know if there is enough time in the day or the week to like actually fully learn all 5. But like I think if you have a basic understanding of like just a needs analysis of that sport, and then you're a good enough strength coach, like you can go back and you can fill in those gaps. And then like, okay, like you have 5 sports, and like if I'm thinking about it, hey, I have baseball, maybe I played 2 of these sports growing up, so I'm going to focus on these other 2, or like I watch this other one a lot. So like, but I don't know anything about this one. So it's like, how much can I learn about this one sport I've never heard of? Like, no matter what it is, or like, but I think like a lot of the general physical qualities will like help you prepare these athletes for every sport. And then last little bit's the icing on the cake.
Of course. Now, French, you got something I can feel you.
Just a little side story. When we were talking about like practicing the sport you're working with, and it's like I feel like I can attest to this just this week. Like I've been throwing a little bit throughout the year. Goal is to hit 80 miles an hour at the state fair, because I supposedly win any prize I want if I can do that at this Iowa State Fair. I don't know if I'm going to get there, but I'm going to try. So I've been throwing like a little bit throughout the year, but kind of spiked my workload this week from throwing a little bit more. And like I was telling Rune, like it was 2 days in a row where I threw quite a bit, like really overreached. And then we did upper body the next day, and I was like, oh, I kind of like I feel like I understand more of how pitchers maybe might feel a little bit like after an outing, and like, okay, gripping stuff is a lot, forearms really tight. For me, it was bicep because I don't have any lay back and tend to muscle everything. But like, and obviously like they're a lot more adapted to that stress than I am, but it is kind of like a good example of, whatever, like if I were to, if you've gone through like a basketball practice or something like that, and then you try to, do like a lower body workout, it's tough, or like literally like any other sport. So I do think it's really good to try to do a little bit of it. I don't know how much I can compare myself though, since I'm just so far removed from baseball, like since I've actually like played, but I think it was a good like experiment nonetheless.
Kind of when we talk about like training and working on your own training, I think we would be very remiss to not bring up the Dungeon Rat training and the Dungeon Rat training system. I feel like even then I've seen you guys throw, it must have been like a makeshift kind of like a javelin in a sense. I've seen you guys go out there and throw that a couple of times. Like those are old stories, but
actual javelin,
Olympic
was it
size.
Yeah,
okay,
it's his javelin.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
My mom got it for me for I think it was Christmas 2 years ago.
Okay, so like literally to the extent of very varied training. Not to make a pun on a pun, but it's extremely varied. You guys are constantly doing random things and differentiating lifts. But just talk about, if you don't mind, like the concept of that entire system and what kind of made it what it is, and why you guys kind of decided, hey, this is going to be something fun to do, or we want to train like this.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the inception of it was 2 off seasons ago, so fall 2024. It's me and Double A strength coach Alan Cooper. We were kind of all training, but like kind of training separately, but doing very similar things. Like, one guy would front squat, maybe I would back squat. This other guy's, doing full cleans or something like that. We're all doing like very similar things. It was like, hey, why don't we just start training together? So like when Coop got back from that off season, we were actually in the process of moving weight room at the time. So we like all of our stuff out on the track. It was all outside, and it was like very, very cluttered. Like it was dirty as heck. And we were just training out there at the end of each day. And like, we were just blasting German techno music. And then we started talking about the name, and like, we're like, man, like this is a dungeon-y setup. And then like Coop had the Rat Pack from when he was at Eastside Catholic when he was in high school. So that's how the name started. But like the focus of the group was just like create a great training environment. And then like we just wanted to be freaks of nature. Like a lot of our basis was like, I want to get jacked. I want to get really fast. I want to get super strong. I want to move well. It was like, how can we just be the best freak athlete possible? So like we throw in a bunch of plyos, like we throw in the strength work, and like it'll change a lot. And like you said, the variability comes in very, very often, but like say 1 week it's a javelin throw, the next week it might be just like, hey, 10 minutes on a timer, go throw these variable med balls around in different positions for time. Maybe one day is going to be baseball throws. Maybe one day we're playing spike ball. Like another day we're like, a throw's a throw. So like where it lies on the general to specific scale is like, up to the athlete and the time of year. But like, we're just going to pick something from that basket. And like, obviously, depending on how we're periodizing it, like, we're not trying to peak at a certain time. So like, we're testing a lot of the principles that we want to do with our athletes on ourselves as well. And I think that's what helps us get a ton of buy-in as well. And it keeps it very fun for us. But like, a lot of the movements that we end up trying in there, like we end up putting in, end up making its way to the athlete in some form or fashion later on. And like, obviously a lot of them don't. Like some of them just absolutely crush us. Like I remember we did like a 0.05 deadlift day on the 1080 quantum, and like we were walking like a geriatric for the next week. So like that's not going to make its way into the program. But a lot of the other fun stuff has. And like I said, I think the big basis of it is like, how can we create the best training environment possible? And like, that's the gold standard. Obviously below that, like, you need obviously good training, good programming, stuff like that. But like, I can't tell you how many times, like, even with that group alone, like I'd be pretty content with where I just lifted a weight and then I see that guy go put on another 25 on each side. I'm like, I got to do that. And like, if I was by myself, I might have not done that. Or like, I don't want to load the spine today. I'm going to hop on the pit chart today. And it's like, I'm not doing that with that group around me. So I think it really keeps you sharp. And it's like, it's a very competitive group too. Cause I would say like within the group that we have with the Dungeon Rat crew, like we're all very, very close at everything, but I feel like everybody's slightly better at different things, which is really cool too. So like, I would say like, I'm really good with a lot of the throwing stuff. And then you have like, Coop's really good with the Olympic lifting stuff. You have like French is elite with like front squatting, and obviously like the bodybuilding stuff. Like dude front squatted 400 for 2, should have been 3, I think. So it's like a really diverse group, but like we're all close enough to be competitive. But like you have people that are really good at other things. So like I can bring in like more of like the old school track and field background. Like French can bring in his knowledge on bodybuilding. You have like Grant and Coop on the Oli side, like Corey from a football background. Like it's a really diverse group. So like we learn a ton, and like there's a lot of exercises I would have never tried or done if it wasn't for these other guys like wanting to do it and helping push us. Like I think the biggest thing for me was like the Oli lifts. Like it's not a background I grew up in, and it's something I've only been doing for about a year now. And it wasn't anything that I ever programmed with my athletes because like I didn't know how to properly coach them too well at the time, and like I didn't know how to do them myself, so it wasn't something I was going to give to my athletes. So but yeah, like circling back to the main point, like I think the coolest thing about it, like with the training environment and then like how diverse the group is like what knowledge we all have.
It just seems like a good time. Like everyone kind of gets a little bit of, like you mentioned, things that you're good at. So you'll kind of like make the program maybe for that day or for that block, whatever it is that you want to emphasize your strength. You guys compete in it, but then at the same time, someone else is going to, like you mentioned with like the Olympic lifts, they're going to put those in because they're really good at them. You're not so good, like as you mentioned, and it's like, well, now you're kind of rounding out the overall athleticism of, and then you have someone who's just going to crush it next to you. So you're going to try and push it. We try to do that a little bit at Elon, Olympic lifting wise. DeMarco is a freak when it comes to those. He's always been a strength sport guy, so anything when it comes to like more of like he's competed in Olympic lifting competitions and strong, and, he's done a couple like powerlifting and strongmen. So if you put any 400-pound object in his hands and he's going to thrive, that it just, when I'm next to him, I'm like, well, all right, well, mine's not as cool. But we get him on a field and it's vice versa, it's that kind of thing. But it is a good time. We actually, not to divert the story, we had Brian Sutton. He's the director of football performance at William & Mary. He came by, and when he came by to view a session, we invited him in for a lift. Same kind of thing like you had mentioned, where he was working up on a clean and he was like, I'm only like 20 pounds from like a PR. And we just were like, hey, you're throwing on 20 pounds today. And lo and behold, he hit it guy let out a massive scream, and it was just a good time. And we're like, "That's great, man. You're not done. That moved quick. Throw another 5 on." So it's one of those things. But you guys are just experiencing that, and even when everybody's not together, it seems like you have somebody with you that you'll have that. So like while it's almost at this point, like for lack of a better term, right now, it's almost like a virtual training group. You know,
Yeah.
you have like in a sense like you guys can be together and you guys can you have that workout partner, so you have that elite training environment wherever you go without having to miss on that. For you, like when you look at that, and French, you can kind of hop in on this too, how important is you know maybe like a training partner or the environment itself versus just whatever it is it's programmed, like how what's that the piece in there that makes it in the important scale for you?
Yeah, I think that like it's one of the more important things you can have as an athlete, and I think like it's kind of like the classic saying like you shouldn't be the smartest guy in the room. Like you also shouldn't be the strongest, and you shouldn't be the best athlete in the room. And I think like a buddy of mine, Bryce Kreider, has spoken about this before, but like if you can find a unique training setting where you have like really really good hardware people, so like very good at the physical side, and then like really really good software people to train with, like I think it'll teach you a lot. Where like the the weight room people, well, like the really good hardware people will teach you to like push in the weight room and like really gain on the physical side, and then I think like the really good software people will tell you like maybe that's not everything too. Like there's a good like ebb and flow of both, but like I can't underestimate the importance of like the training environment, but also your training partner too. Like I think having someone to bounce ideas off of, having someone in the gym to push you with, like even this summer, like I'm with French all the time. Like I said, a lot of those things with the rat group like apply to even this summer. Like that the training gets long, like it gets hot out, whatever. Like there's some things you might not want to do, but then in the back of your head, you're like, I don't want to tell them that. Like I'm not going to be the one to say that. I'm not going to be the one to like not throw on more weight or anything like that. And like at the end of the day too, like it is a competition. Like like if you don't have that competitive drive, like if you're just okay with like no, that guy just lifted 5 pounds more than me, I'm okay with that. Like I don't know what something's wrong with you. You should get checked out. But like it's just a good, like I think it's also good to have someone to check you too. Like if you're slacking off, like I think it's easier to just kind of like not understand that for a longer period of time. And if you have a good enough training partner, they should be able to come up to you and be like, hey man, like you need to pick it up, or hey, that was a really good lift, like anything like that. But yeah, I think the training environment, training partner is huge, and I think that's what like West Side did the best. Like like old Rhino rant, not to reference that again, but like they he goes into that rant of like they train like savages, they were savages, but that was the truth. Like there's no magic pudding in like the conjugate system. Like it's the fact that there were an insane guys in a crazy gym that were all trying to be the best in the world at the same time. And I think that's the same thing with like the older driveline gym. Like to go to Kent, Washington in the middle of winter in the Pacific Northwest, first of all, you got to be a little psychotic. It's not that fun out there. I don't know if anyone's ever lived out there. It's very gloomy and it's raining all the time, let alone to go to this gym that like some of the plates were 43 pounds, some of them are 47. Like it was not a glorious gym. It was 2 racks that were bought off of Facebook Marketplace. Like to go train there, you had to be a psychopath. And like now you have this gym of psychopaths. And I think that's where you get elite results. And yeah, their training systems are really good, but it was like the training environment is really what set them apart.
You could take that program and pop it in somewhere else, and it's not going to give you those same results because it was
Yeah.
the people in that room, and that room specifically of you have a tinkerer and a madman who was essentially the coach but also an athlete himself, and just for lack of a better term, batshit crazy people who were willing to break themselves off at a moment's notice in order to
Yeah.
achieve something. So in baseball, pitching schedules, hitting schedules, all these things, especially when it comes to like, I think in my opinion, the higher the level, a lot of times the smaller the lifting groups get, just from not always have, everyone's on a different schedule. How do you bring that kind of energy as a coach into some of these into some of these sessions when it may be only one or two people who may not even train regularly together on a normal basis, and bring some of that kind of West Side-esque energy into their sessions when it is time to have those training pieces, when you do want them to get after it. How do you kind of curate that environment and like bring it in as a coach? Or are you more on the kind of side of, hey, we're at this point, we know the work that needs to get done. I'm going to facilitate this work and let the athletes kind of curate the environment that they feel like they can strive in.
Yeah, no, I mean it is tough, especially like baseball season alone. Like just with how long it is, like it can be tough to really bring that juice every single day. Like their competitive season alone is 9 months out of the year. So like there's going to be times obviously where it's natural. Like you're in spring training, you have a bunch of guys there, but like you said, you're out in an affiliate. Most of the time, you have 1 to 2 guys lifting at the time. So like if they're doing similar things, you could try to pair that up and make it competitive. But I think at the very least, you need to just like make a make them compete against themselves. So whether that was a weight they hit a week ago, or you're giving them a velocity zone. Like I think something that's been great for us is like we have a Virtuvi, the bar speed measuring devices. I think that's how you pronounce it, Virtuvi. But like we've seen this year, like we're not programming speed zones for guys, but we have them lift the same amount of weight. You strap that thing on the bar, and then you see intent go through the roof, and it's been great for us. And it's like we have some older guys who might not want to push a ton of weight at this point in their career, and like maybe they weren't with us in the off season, so they weren't built up to do it in season right now, especially while they're playing every day. But like the best thing we can do, I think, is get intent from what they're comfortable doing. And I think that's been a great way just to add competition to a lift of someone just by themselves. Like whether it's, hey, like instead of just doing these broad jumps, jumping out and walking back each time, like let's put a piece of tape where you landed. Like I try to every single time guy does a broad jump, I'll go and I'll try to put something right where his feet landed. And I'll be like, hey, jump past this the next time. Or, hey, like you did your warm up sets, like, okay, that you were at 0.75, and it's like first work set, he's over a 1. And it's like the intent was just not there. And it's like you got to give them some sort of feedback loop to work off of, whether that's like auditory feedback or, like I said, just a number to see. But I think you do stuff like that, and it's a really good way to get that training environment with just a one-person training crew, which is, like you said, like most of the time what you're going to get in season.
It's nice to know that the same tools and the same methods of trying to gauge and get more out of a certain lift is the same, I think, at almost every level, just depending on wherever it is. When I was at a D2 level, a roll of tape was our best friend when it came to jumps. When we did vertical jumps, we didn't have a jump mat for like 2 years, so we would have an athlete put it on their hand and try to slap it. And then when you got it, we pull a ladder out and you write your name, whoever had the highest. Yeah. So that was what we did. And then same thing on a broad jump, you put the tape down. That's the furthest one, go for it. And now that, I'm at a place where we're lucky enough to have a lot of tools and utility, it is the Vitruve or we sometimes, I think we just purchase some OVRs, which those are great too, but slap that on there. Dynamic effort day, your weight's not changing. You just got to move that as fast as possible.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be, $5,000 fancy tools. That'd be great. Don't get me wrong. You guys have access to 1080s. Trust me when I say I would love that. But
it's like you put the tape on the ground too, and then you see other guys like walk in and kind of start looking, then like they're curious.
I want to beat that.
And then they want to try it. Like that's something I think like maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, or a month or 2 months into the season, like we just put up a leaderboard in the weight room, and it was like the basic 3 metrics that we cared about from the force plates and then like catapult sprint speed. And like now you see guys, they come in and they're talking shit to each other, and they're like, I want to be number 1 on there. I want to jump right now. And like that was a guy who like we had to pull teeth from to get to jump before, but now it's like he sees someone's name on the board and like he wants to beat them. And it just curates a really good environment right there. And like it doesn't have to be force plates, like you said. It could be broad jump distance, whatever you have in your resources to be able to track. Like you don't have to spend any money to do it. Like you said, it could be a roll of tape and just a tape measure, and you're good. But
that's the beauty of it. we kind of talked about some different training, but French, I'll kind of let you. I'm going to set the stage. I'll let you take the reins on this one, so I can shut up. But Rooney, there was a little bit of like your take on like the spinal engine and the spinal engine theory, and like how that doesn't just necessarily translate energy, but how it is like the truly the engine of the movement and capability. What had you kind of dive into like the spine as a mover or as the facilitator of movement, and like what has that kind of changed your ideas on training?
So again, it started with me being a really poor thrower of the baseball throughout college, and just not understanding why. Like I got to the point where I was, quote unquote strong enough, like stronger than other guys throwing significantly harder than me. I had pretty good range of motion, like again, like more than other guys throwing harder than me. So I was like, where am I at here? So like again, while I was at Driveline, like it was really good environment for people just trying crazy things and applying them. So like that's actually where I first started learning about like kind of like loading the spine through range, Jefferson curls, back bridges, stuff like that. Like that was really popular, especially with the guys who were part of the pitching group at the time there. Um, and then that's where I started just like reflecting. I was like, okay, all like the core like training I've done to this point has all been like anti-rotation, anti-flexion, anti-extension, which is like kind of a big like older school thing, like where I was getting my programming from Cressy, which is like really good stuff. But then I also realized like, man, I'm like really, really weak in these very vulnerable positions. And then you go and you watch a guy throw, whether it is a javelin, a baseball off a mound, and like if you look at the positions they're getting into, you're like, oh no, I wonder why my body's not letting me get there. Like I'm very weak in these dynamic positions with the spine. Um, so again, like I kind of just started reflecting down that rabbit hole. I was like, and that's where I got into Ido Portal, who's like a very like I think in the like U.S. view of like SNC, like more of the woo woo guys out there, but like he has a lot of like good material. Like he worked with Conor McGregor. He's worked with some MLB baseball players. So like that's kind of the first like area I dove into, and it's a lot of like the animal based movement, but like applying it well. So like it's not to say like, hey guys, we're not benching, we're not squatting, we're not rowing anymore. We're just going to do all these like weird animal based movements and look like hippies crawling through the grass. But like, how can we work that into an athlete's training program? So like, oh, some of these crawl variations are great for warm ups, and like they're actually training my spine to like laterally flex and extend, very dynamically, and like so I start getting strong there, and then I realize like, oh man, like my shoulders feeling better, like I'm throwing the ball better. Okay, like this is pretty cool. So just started kind of learning it through that, and then like if you look back, like I was showing French the other night, it dates back like thousands of years. Like if you go back to like old ancient like Chinese martial arts, like BC time, they talk about how like the core is the center of all your strength. You have like Hippocrates, who's like again like focusing on like the core is the center of everything. That's your strength. And like what I really like is my dad introduced me to like martial arts background very young, and like he loved the Gracie family and like the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And like one of the videos I always loved was like there's a video of Hickson Gracie on the beach in San Diego. I've posted it on my Instagram a few times, but he's just kind of like flapping his arms around, and he looks like he's on drugs. But like if you talk to him, and it's where like Conor McGregor got that walkout from. It's like an old like the core is the driver of your movement and the limbs are just supposed to follow. So like they do that movement to just like focus on relaxing everything like shoulder down and feel like you're driving everything from your core. And like I said, this isn't like to just say, hey, we need to abandon weightlifting, but like I think there's a lot of places we can work this into traditional like weight room programs. Like I said, warm ups, rest periods from your compounds. Like, hey, instead of just like doing a set of squats and then sitting there like for 3 to 5 minutes and not doing anything, like why don't we go roll around? Like why don't we go through some Jefferson curls or hit some back bridges in that time? Like hey, with our accessory movements, like let's actually load the spine and the rib cage through full ranges of motion. It doesn't need to be like all these crazy different exercises, but I think like once you start to understand like French was saying, like, hey, okay, you do like 5-3-1 for 6 weeks, and then like go try and throw a baseball and see how your spine and your shoulder feels.
I could,
On that
yeah,
same go ahead, French.
no, like I feel like we had touched on this. This was some time back before Rooney and I really kind of got into it, and he kind of like honestly kind of like blew my socks off with that like presentation he gave me on the spinal engine theory, and I was like, damn, this is like a lot more because, like you said, I think the traditional view of S&C is like everything's like bracing and anti-extension, anti-flexion, like keep your spine. You're always taught to keep like a neutral spine in like every movement you do, squat, deadlift, everything. Like you don't want to like bending the spine. Like when you first learn about like resistance training is like that's like a cardinal sin is like you want to keep your spine neutral, which is good. Like obviously like you need to be able to like brace and make your spine like super stiff. But I think especially when it comes to like throwing sports, where you're trying to throw an implement, like having pliability and like range of motion and strength through that range of motion is like super important. And I kind of think obviously it's pretty pertinent with like in throwing sports, like I said, but I also wonder like if other sports like football, very heavy contact sport, like could you avoid some like low back injuries, stuff like that if people like trained, and maybe people are training the spine like that in football. I just haven't really seen it. I think it's a lot more pertinent like obviously like in things like baseball or like throwing events in track and field. But it just kind of like made me rethink about like how we train the spine. Like a lot of times it's just like bracing as hard as you can and making sure it doesn't move, which I think is good when it comes to like super heavy compound movements. But then also touching those other ranges like okay, side bending, flexion, extension under lighter loads, and then kind of progressively overloading those over time. Like it shouldn't just be like your spine's meant to do all those things. If it can't do those things, you don't really have a spine. And if you're weak in those ranges, then you're probably a little bit more vulnerable to things like injuries, stuff like that. So
I was kind of thinking of this as you were saying that, French. Like, I don't hear me out on this, but a lot of people will hear this at first and say, "Well, I'm not a throwing athlete, so that shouldn't matter as much." But my understanding and my belief is that this can and should, in theory, translate so much more across almost every sport, just like you had mentioned, from whether it be a football athlete or something as a 10K runner. You know, whether they like to believe it or not, go run a 10K. Think about how your low back feels at the end of a 10K.
yeah,
I bet it's going to be just shot if you can't, because most of us in the common world, I'm going to die as soon as I run 401 meter. I will explode. My body can't handle that. But if my spine was built a little bit more to handle like that specific gait, to be able to kind of twist, turn, and relate that energy and handle the continuous movement on there for an extended duration of time, a good 10K, we'd like to believe, for the average person, it's probably under 40 minutes for the average person, not an elite athlete. But if it's able to withstand that, I think we'll be in a better spot to be able to A, improve the time of the output itself, but B, be able to attribute larger training times or training economy to it. How much, like, Rune, when you look at this and you say, if the spine's a limiting factor, how much do you start addressing it in some of those rest periods or in those warm-ups? Or is it something that you just believe should always be within the program at certain points, just to continuously move and address it? Not to say like it may be a Stuart McGill style where we're only going to hit one single pull up and have a pig spine and do bird dogs all the time, but maybe these other like continuous crawls and rolls or non-conventional ways to address that piece of the body.
Yeah, I keep them in some form or fashion basically all year, almost regardless of the athlete too. Like obviously, depending on the athlete, I might have more or less in there. Like if it's a guy comes from a powerlifting background, like really stiff, like typically are your stronger like powerlifting background guys, like that guy's probably going to have a lot more of that type of work, not only paired with the compounds, but like in his accessory work, like a lot more focus on just more expansive type exercises. Where like the guy who's 180 pounds and still generally very, very weak is probably going to have a little less directly of that. But like I'm still going to work it into warm ups. I'm still going to have a crawl in some form of fashion. And like when he, it's It's still going to be like, okay, you're doing a single arm dumbbell row. Like, just make sure you actually like rotate the rib cage, get the scap all the way around, and like on the way back up, like throw in a little rotation. Like, you don't just need to be stiff scap, stiff spine, and just like flexing the elbow the whole time. But like, I think it's similar to any like training under any other area of the body. Like, you want it to be able to withstand force and be very strong, and then you also should like want it to train through full range. And like, nobody looks at like, lower body training and is like, oh, you should never load that through range of motion. Like, if you just, it's pretty common practice now where like, okay, you don't let your knees crack over the toes, like, ever. No wonder your knees hurt. But then it's like people don't load their spine and they're like, my low back hurts. I wonder why. It's like, hey, you've never loaded it. Or like, you went to pick up this Amazon package off your front porch that was 20 pounds and like you blew your back out. It's like, that shit, I don't understand how that happened. Like, that just should never happen. And like your shoulder, like, I don't know, like, like old school SNC, it was like, you go Joel Seedman like 90-90, and it's like, oh, I wonder why my joints don't feel great. Like, okay, that's a strong position, but like, I'm not resilient. And it's like the same to your spine. And then you add in the demands of like a baseball player, both a hitter and a pitcher. Like, how many times are you rotating every day? And like, obviously that's going to change the scale of like, okay, you're rotating a lot more. We don't need to do as much of this rotational work in the weight room right now. We can probably dose in a little more like anti-rotation work, but I'm still going to have some level of like fully loaded rotation. It might just be a little less intense, but like, we're going to do a ton of that in the off season when we're not rotating as much through the skill. Like, I'm going to get you really, really strong in deep ranges. We'll start like, maybe it's just starting out with like iso holds. Like, I really like even in season now, like, we just get a guy with like a PVC on their back. We rotate them. We have like a block between their knees. We have them try to pull out of that. And like, we'll start light and then we'll progressively add intensity. But like, just finding small ways like that to like get stress through like the core musculature and like just get the spine moving. Like, hey, is it a guy who, like last night, our, starter came out of the game. He went 5 innings through like 80 pitches. Like, he just rotated and side bend a lot. So like, I don't need to do any of that in high velocities, especially. So like, what I did with him, we did some like isometric core work, and then we did some like really slow like med ball around the world where like I was holding his feet, torso was off the bench, and it was just really, really slow, like going back into extension while rotating. And like, that's great for that day. And then like, maybe on another day like today, he's probably going to wake up and be pretty sore, pretty stiff from like the start yesterday and a good lift. So like, today we're going to go in like very low intensities and just move through full ranges of motion and just focus on like relaxing into these deep positions and like regaining any range of motion that we may have lost. And then maybe later in the week, like when he throws a bullpen, so maybe it's only like 20 pitches that day, we can actually load some of it like heavier, or we can load it with more velocity. But like, there's still a lot of opportunity to do that in season.
For sure. How, like, when you're looking at the spine, typically when you look at the spine, a lot of people are going to unnecessarily, sometimes in my opinion, but maybe sometimes other warranted, they're going to look at the rib cage. French, I think you know where I'm going with this. And that's like, when you're looking at that spine, or how much type of movement or what you may be biasing towards them, how much do you take into account like a wide versus a narrow like ISA, and if you do at all?
Yeah, I mean, something I acknowledge that's there, but like, it's not necessarily going to drive the needle on changing what I want the athletes to do per se. It might make like very small tweaks to exercise selection, although I would say I don't do that very often. Like, it's just going to inform me of like why a guy might be limited in something. So like, you have a guy who's like pretty narrow, like, oh, he's like a little more shoulders rolled forward. Like, he's probably going to have a little more of a problem getting into spinal extension. So it's just like more so of like how I'm going to cue guys to breathe. Like, I really like to just put my hand on them while they're doing stuff. So if like super narrow ISA guy, like I'm trying to introduce them to like a back bridge, like I probably just need to understand that he's going to struggle at that for a little longer and why. But it doesn't mean I'm not going to train him to get into a back bridge and like do extension. Same with like super wide guy. Like, I want him to be able to flex, but like, I probably need to understand that like he's going to be a little more limited than other guys on the extreme level might be, at least. So like, it's something that I'm acknowledging that's there. It's giving me feedback of like why they might not be able to get into certain positions, or like what we also might need to hit on first before we can get them into those positions. Um, but like it's not a big factor in determining like, hey, this is a narrow program and this is a wide program. Like, I think the athletes should be doing both. Like, you a lot of the traditional is like, oh, the narrow should front squat more and like the wide should back squat shorter. Like, to me, it's just like, when can they perform the best, like this in the safest manner, push the most output on, and like feel good bouncing back the next day, especially in season.
Almost like you're kind of letting it help guide the program and not be the program. I
Yeah.
feel like that becomes, unfortunately, it becomes a lot of the natural human, almost like the Dunning-Kruger effect, where when we learn these new pieces, whether, narrow versus wide ISA was huge for, 3 or 4 years ago. And then a little bit more now, we're kind of seeing like a PRI becoming like the big thing, whatever it is. It becomes this like cyclical thing of it, every 2 to 3 years, there's something. And that's what it becomes the basis of almost everybody's program versus becoming, maybe like a salt and pepper to their meat and potatoes. And we kind of get it inverted. For you, when you look at that, whether it be with the field or maybe yourself, however you kind of want to view it as this question goes, why do you think that is, and how would you combat that with like this new information that comes out? Like as a coach, like we're constantly being, looking at new information and continuous education. How do you take that continuous education that you absorb and not flip everything on its head, but use it to kind of guide the next principle and be the, quote unquote, the accoutrement to the main dish?
Yeah, I think more often than not, it comes from a good spot. Like, people are trying to like find the next best thing to help their athletes, and like obviously then it turns into like you have people selling products and like needing to market something to make money. So like you have a lot of spin-offs of like the same ideas like constantly coming out, and I think that's where like it's important to have like a good group around you to bounce ideas off. Like, we have a really good like core group of strength coaches within our org, and like I think we have a very good system for like, we have like a group chat that we always keep, and like we send something in, and then you have like, maybe you just have a good group think process on it, and like and then I think just like having a good, which like our boss, like Stephen Simmons, he says a lot, but like he has a good like bullshit meter. And I think just like being able to like look through a lens of like seeing stimulus for stimulus, and like you're saying, like whether it's just like rebranded PRI or like what is this, and it's like just understanding like from a principal's perspective, like, is this actually moving the needle, or is this just something to like make someone feel good for 5 minutes? And like that could be important. Like, I think that's where like people get all gung-ho on PRIs. Like, it's not making structural change, but like it's making a short-term change to allow you to load it in the weight room and actually make structural change. So like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, but you also probably shouldn't be saying that like these 2 or 3 small tweaks are going to add 10 miles an hour to your velo. Like, that's not true. It's also not going to like just get you out of pain. Like, it's giving you a small window to feel pain free for a little bit, to be able to go in and train, to make longer term adaptations, to actually hopefully be pain free one day. Um, and I think that's where it is with like a lot of different things. It's just like seeing the stimulus for stimulus. Like, nothing is really this shiny new toy that's coming out of nowhere that like nobody's ever thought of before. Like I said, with the spinal engine stuff, like that's something that's gained a lot of traction and a lot of popularity in the last few years. But like I said, like you can find stuff dating back 2,000 plus years of people talking about the importance of like the spine being the generator and like the engine of the body. So I think that's where it's like having a good group around you to like, hey, I saw this. What do you think about that? And like, oh no, that's just like this rebranded from 10 years ago. Or like, hey, this is where it could have actual utility. Um, but yeah, I think just like see the stimulus for the stimulus. What is this actually doing to the body, and not just like, what does this exercise look like?
If that's the case, then what is something that you've seen where you're just like, what's something that you are just completely out on when you've seen it and you just look at it and you're like, there's no way.
I would say like a lot of the like I honestly I do think a lot of the basic like just PRI breathing stuff. Like I said, there's definitely a small utility for that. I'll do some of the stuff, but like I think if a lot of people just like took better care of their bodies, like just periodized their training better, and then just like got generally warm riding a bike, playing spike ball, like I think people like that's where I fell into a while. Like I was an injured athlete who was always thinking like if I didn't go through this detailed foam rolling routine and like a lacrosse ball my subclavius and do all these stupid things that like that's the reason I wasn't feeling good that day, when in reality like I was like almost like paralyzed by all these different things that I had to do, and then like oh crap I forgot to do this one thing. um but that's something I see like a lot of people just I think like wasting their time on is like, hey man, you just foam rolled for an hour today. Like, do you think you could have done that for 10 minutes and then spent the other 50 minutes like eating or recovering or like actually training hard? Like, I think some of the low level stuff like that just gets glorified a lot. And it's like I said, it's not that it's not important. It's just that like I said, like I think you could cut a lot of that time in half, spend a lot more of that time just like getting better at your sport, and you'd be a better athlete at the end of the day than like thinking that a lot of these like very low needle movers like you should probably like train really hard, recover really well, and then like fill in the gaps from there. And then instead of I think a lot of people prioritize like how I feel every single day. It's like obviously in the competitive season that matters a lot, but I think a lot of people take that very far.
Almost like they're majoring in the minors.
Yeah. Yeah, like we talk about like all the time, like French and I will see guys doing stuff, and like you're stepping over dollar bills to pick up pennies, and it's like dude, if you just spent a little more time in this area, you could have way more time to just relax and eat, and like if you still wanted to do that stuff, fine, but like
I mean, that's gold right there. Stepping over dollar bills to get pennies.
Yeah.
yeah, it's the guys that like you see people walk around and they're like only going to drink water out of a glass bottle, but then they're like partying 3 nights a week and going to bed at 3 a.m. It's like, come on, man, like
But the microplastics,
yeah, like,
that's what's doing it. That's what's doing me in.
yeah,
Do you,
but like
do you know what
3 nights
they
of
package
4
that?
hours sleep and like 15 beers is like that's not moving the needle.
Yeah. One thing that I feel like kind of plays into really coaching in general, but especially with like the skill acquisition and just like motor learning is like a lot of the stuff you do with like constraints led approach, which is something that I haven't really like dove into until like this year and really like since my time taking the job, but like just kind of go into how you like to set up certain like tasks for athletes, whether that be in the weight room or on the field to kind of, maybe it's less cueing, but more so of like letting the athlete figure out how to move well based on like how you set up X exercise or X drill.
Yeah, so like I'm a very big believer in the constraint led approach, and like I it's I think a lot of people kind of go back and forth on it because a lot of people view it as just like lazy coaching. But like obviously there's a world where you need to step in and say some things, but like I very much think that like you should just set the athlete up in an environment that allows them to express what you need them to do. So like for example, like you have a pitcher who is like super rotational. You're trying to add some like lateral flexion, get them a little more up top. Like instead of just trying to sit there and like cue them while they're throwing, of like move your arm here. Oh, bad, arm higher. Like why don't we just tell them like, hey, throw this ball as far as possible. You can't do that from a low arm slot. Like the ball's just gonna like two seam out, like spin off arm side. So like you kind of need to like clear some room for that arm to work and get on top of the ball and really drive it far. So like I think some basic things like that are great. Whether it's like different implements from different sports, or even within that, like you've seen like weighted balls and plyos be a great constraint. Like the reason they don't have laces on like the old driveline balls are because they wanted to separate the feel from a baseball to like it's just a round implement, and they're even slightly different shapes than the baseball because they don't want you thinking while it's in your hand, oh, this is a baseball in my hand. It's just like I take this, I pick it up, I throw it, and like the weight does a lot of the effect on the arm. So like if you're a guy who has a super long arm action and you're getting like really out of your body, like a great way to fix that is like put a heavy ball, put a 1,000 gram ball in your hand. And like if you get really long, you're going to feel that. Like the weight is just a lot more distal in the arm. So it's going to help you stay tighter and like work more around the body. Similar to like a lighter ball, like you're really going to have to relax that arm to get that light ball to throw, like to go really fast versus like if you're getting super pushy with a light ball, like I would throw heavy balls almost harder than I would throw the light balls because I was like a super like like not muscular, but like muscle driven thrower. And like I really was like poor in being able to relax into deep positions and like whip my body around to get it to get it to throw the ball. So like, say I would take it was our 9 ounce red plow. It was I think 225 gram. I might get that wrong, but like, say I would throw that at 85 miles an hour. I would throw a ball 4 ounces lighter at like 86 miles an hour, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? So it's like, for me, I was a guy who needed to like work into relaxation a lot more, which like ditch the heavy balls for a guy like me, throw a lot more lighter balls, like just try to be a little more athletic, a little like less muscle driven. And for me, it's like I would PR on like 90% days. And it's like, why is that? It's like, oh, I'm trying less because like I'm just kind of flowing and like I'm trying to move fast, but I'm not trying to throw the ball hard. Um, and I think you apply that to any sport. You can apply that to the weight room. Like I think that's a good thing strength coaches do really well. Like it's even like we were talking about before with the broad jumps. Like, hey, we're trying to get you to jump farther. So like jump over this tape right here. Like that's a built-in constraint right there. Like, okay, now I have to jump over this tape. But I think like I was an athlete growing up who was just like, I think killed by over cueing. Like I would go throw bullpens and it was like 4 or 5 different verbal cues of where to keep my lead elbow and where to keep my back hand and where to keep my knee and my hip. And then like, not only am I like performing worse and now I'm throwing slower because I'm like so domed up about where every piece of my body is instead of just being put into environments where my body can figure it out because it has to. Like I don't complete the task unless I do it this way. So like my body is going to organize itself to figure that out.
So it's almost like to the same extent that French, you and I have talked about this before of, letting the athletes self-organize and have exploration by using the constraints-led approach, just manipulate the environment that they have to work in and let them continue to self-organize to achieve the task versus like you said, over cueing and getting it almost like in their head. You allow yourself you're the director of the environment. You put what you want them to throw where you want them to throw, and they'll naturally have to shift into a position to get comfortable or, in a sense, to have the output that you're looking for versus you telling them, I need to see your elbow, this high or this far back and have this action. They don't have to think. The body does the thinking. It becomes more of a subconscious kind of thing that occurs versus them being very conscious and having to work through. And it's almost like it might slow down the process. Yeah, in my opinion,
the best training should be completely thoughtless. Like you should aspire to like put your athletes in an environment where they think as little as possible. And I think that's where like you'll actually see them accomplish some really good feats and like really make good long-term progress that'll stick. Because then like if you're just constantly giving them verbal cues, like they're always searching for that verbal cue, and like maybe that's different this day. Like their body's in a different spot this day. So like, oh, I thought I was holding external rotation on my back hip today, but like now I'm always searching for that feel and that cue, and I'm not just like doing the thing. So it's like, how thoughtless can we make this training session? I think is like a very good goal for a lot of coaches to go into it for the athlete.
I mean, just so you're aware, like that doesn't just happen with baseball either. I mean, I'll put some of my athletes, my 400 runners, they'll be pretty aerobically developed. So, I'll have them do 600s and things like that when it comes to the fall, when it comes to that, especially my 400 hurdlers. And I'll say, hey, I want you to run it in, 78 or 82 seconds. I want to be able to just hold this. And they're like, well, that's 16.4 every 100 meters. I'm like, just stop thinking about that. Yeah. They're looking for these. And I think there's a little bit to the type of athletes that you work with. And I think a lot of, I don't want not to do this generation thing, but I think a lot of the younger generation, they're looking for the inner workings to discover this and figure this out on their own and kind of own a little bit of their training, which for some points it's a really good thing. But when we just want that brain to turn off and it's like, I want to see how you go after this. Is your approach to go out super hard and then kind of let the decay occur? Or are you trying to, in the sense, maybe like a negative split where you're going to try and ease into it and then kick? Part of that in our training, and even to the same extent, in the weight room and things like that, is I want to see what you maneuver around this environment. I don't want to just tell you this is the only way to do that, because maybe at one point you'll leave me and, if, for us, a college strength coach, they're looking at it and they're going, I'm not going to be your professional strength coach. You're going to go somewhere and they're going to develop you. You need to be able to maneuver that environment. Or I don't know if, again, transfer portal, you might not like where you go next and you might not like that strength coach, that performance coach. You have to be able to have this, I don't want to say like the training knowledge, but this base of knowing yourself as an athlete in order to maneuver around. And if you don't have that and you're always looking for the external cues or external validation or correction, you'll never be able to internally validate that you felt like you had moved well or that you were able to do this. So the ownership becomes less and less by trying to discover all the ins and outs while someone else is being paid to have that.
Yeah, and I think it's part of like, they learned the skill that you wanted instead of just they learned the cue you wanted, and then like I said, like over time that kind of goes away. It's like, even I think in the weight room we kind of like can overcoach at times too. We're like, obviously there's times where like, guy heavy back squat, like we need to step in pretty immediately, but like guys doing a half kneeling cable row, like, like you should have coached him up enough to where he like knows what he needs to do. So like oftentimes I'll see a guy like, all right, first rep like might be a little shitty, and then you see him kind of like working through it in his head. And like if I would have just went in and be like, hey, pull your scap back, keep your elbow back, like he didn't find it on his own, but like I can see the wheels spinning, and like he's like, okay, like first one didn't feel too good, so like second one I like it better, and then like reps 3, 4, 5, 6, like really good. But like he's coaching himself through that movement, and that's going to last for him, like you said, the rest of his career. Like a lot of these guys at our level right now, they're like, they might only be with us for a month. Like they'll sign a contract, then they're out. They have an opt out, they're gone in 1 month. So it's like, I want to help that guy through the rest of his career. So it's like, if I can teach him to like be his best coach, like I've done a great job. Like I want them to like almost need me as less as possible. And like, I don't like, that shouldn't sound lazy, but it's like, I think that's where I've done a really good job of coaching. It was like, I've taught them how to coach themselves through those movements. And like I said, like, I think guy does like a cable row and it's here. And then you see the strength coach kind of like barking at him through the weight room. And then like, all he did was learn like this cue of this feel. And like, I don't know if he really learned the movement or like why necessarily that's wrong, or even what he was doing wrong. And like, that's something French and I talk about a lot too. But like, I think it's just as important to like tell athletes when they're doing things good, because like they might not have known that like, hey, that rep was solid, or like if he's not saying anything to me, I guess it's not a good rep or whatever. But like compliment them when they're doing things good, like give them props, like, hey, like those RDLs were great, like you did this, give them feedback. I'm like, and they're like, oh, okay, I didn't know that was good, or like I didn't feel that, or like I can now remember that feeling. Coach told me it was good. I'll associate it with that feeling. And then like, that's where they really have long-term success, with like working through those movements and being their own coach.
There's almost like something to be said when French, I think I just cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead.
There's almost something to be said. Like I question my athletes a lot, French. And I think you've seen this a little bit, where the first thing when they like, can you watch this set? I want to know if I'm doing it right. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask, well, how'd that feel? Well, it felt like a lot of pressure in my low back. Why do you think that was? Right. I think that can lead them more to understanding the movement and things like that. And it's, the long-term effect is they now know the movement and the correct movement patterns, other than like, oh, I just know that in an RDL, my shoulders should be back and my chin should be tucked. They go, well, if I'm hinging, I really don't want to make it on my low back. It should feel like my hips. They discover those things, and then they can become, by the time in my system, obviously it's like 4, now 5 years with the NCAA's new rule, but you almost like have little assistant coaches, but with maybe your back's turned and you're helping one newcomer and they're talking to another newcomer of like, hey, this is what you should do. I don't know about you guys, but like for me, I'm like, that's awesome. I have this, that's a training environment where we have everybody who really understands and can make this better. But do you guys typically, in your systems, or even in a sense, like when you're at Driveline, or when you were with Coastal Carolina, and even now in pro ball, like, do you kind of feel like questioning the athlete is kind of guiding them along that path versus just constantly cueing?
Oh yeah. And I think like even in the sense of like, hey, phrasing the question of like where or a guy comes in, he's like, hey, I'm sore, and it's like, where are you sore? And not just like, oh yeah, you're sore in your hamstrings because we lifted lower yesterday, and then they're like, yeah. And it's like, hey, where am I sore? And then they point to their quads and like their adductors, and they're like, oh okay, like let the athlete tell you. Ask them more questions, like ask more open-ended questions, and like don't try to like feed them into a corner with answers, and kind of like let them more express of like how they're feeling it. They might simply not know, like, you said your hamstrings, and they're like, yeah, my hamstrings, and they're like, some athletes I don't know if they could tell you where their hamstrings are. I don't know. French and I have some athletes, I don't know if they could, but like I think most of them could. But yeah, like you're saying, like why are you feeling that? Why do you think you're feeling that way? Like, oh hey, my glutes are really sore today. Like, why do you think they're sore? Oh, we did heavy RDLs yesterday. Like, yes, that's good. And they're like, oh, okay, good. Like, like normally I associate soreness with bad, but like, no, hey, that's good because you're in this block of your training, and like this is exactly what we want. Like, I think a really good example of that is like some of the jumps we get on the force plates. Like, athletes always want to see their numbers going up, and like we want them going down at a lot of periods of time, especially in the off season. And they're pissed when they see that red, when they're like their numbers are tanking, and then they look at us and we're like, no, that's good. And they're like, it just leads to really good conversations.
Mm-hmm. Have them understand a little bit.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't like overestimate like how much you can help like educate athletes. Like, I think oftentimes because we have been doing this for so long, we've been training, like we know, like, that's our job. Like, we just kind of assume that like, okay, athlete knows how to train, knows their body, and that's not always the case. So like, I had athlete the other day, like wasn't like getting full range of motion on like a dumbbell bench. I was like, hey, like, does it bother you when you go all the way down? He's like, no. And I was like, can you try to go all the way down? He's like, well, what am I doing now? Like, wasn't simply like, he wasn't like, oh, like I'm only going to go down halfway because, screw this guy. He just literally like didn't have that like full body, that body awareness. So it's like, sometimes they literally just don't know. So don't like miss that opportunity to like you said, like kind of educate them. And then over time, like they can be their own best coach. And then kind of circling back to like, setting up the environment to be like as easy as possible. I feel like this could probably relate to other sports too, but baseball is like so rife with like data and like numbers. And I feel like that's like super important for our guys. Like, you'll see like, after a guy like has an at bat, like maybe they struck out or something like that, it's right to the iPad to look at like all the pitches that they just saw. It's like they're like consuming so much data, and that's such a big part of like baseball today and like the culture of baseball that like, I think us, obviously, like we have metrics that we care about and we do try to educate them on those. But like, if they're always like hearing input from everyone else, like I think we can take that opportunity and try to make the environment in the weight room a little bit more like free flowing and like less of that, if that makes sense. Just because like it's just kind of the nature of sports today in general. I feel like analytics are so much bigger now than they are in the past, but like baseball especially, like if you ever seen the movie Moneyball, like that's that
the
on
entire
steroids.
thing.
Yeah, it's like that on steroids today. So like they're always like searching for and looking at numbers and data and like analytics and stuff like that. So I feel like the more we can kind of stray away from that in the weight room, at least, that can kind of be that part of the day where they don't have to think about that and still accomplish good work.
He gets on base.
Yeah, exactly.
I got two quick things. Well, one quick thing, and then I want to hear a big opinion from you. Well, the first one is an opinion, but obviously, have you guys seen the Strong Act, the reclassification aspect to strength and conditioning coaches or sports performance coaches and everything like that with the government classification?
I have seen that. I saw it on Strength Coach Network.
Yeah, so
Um, they posted something about it, which is I was honestly kind of surprised, but it's good.
yeah, so Burgess Owens is a representative out of, I believe, Utah, and he introduced the Strong Act, which sends a classification to coaches in the federal government system. Essentially, right now, we're being lumped in with group exercise trainers, personal trainers, and scouts. So our pay scale is kind of like federally classified as someone who would maybe, go coach someone's flag football team, which is, in a sense, the goal of this is that Owens played college football, understands like the grueling aspect of being a coach, and he's like, they're all underpaid. So by getting us classified within the federal government, we get our own pay scale. It can commensurate salaries, possibly higher, and hopefully help us all out. Like that's the goal. Do you see any like negatives or is this kind of like one of those things that this has been a long overdue thing, and this could be really good for the field?
Yeah, no, I think that could be awesome. I mean, I think like that's a pretty common thing across like all sports. It's like typically the strength coaches are pretty underpaid, and like I feel like I've always looked at it where it's like, how do you determine the value of the strength coach? Because obviously you have a lot of like really successful teams that are winning championships don't always have like quote unquote great strength coaches, and like honestly a lot of the best strength coaches you'll find at like D2, D3, or like mid-major, low-level D1s, and it's kind of like how do you quantify that? But like the only thing I hope that doesn't turn into is like just programs starting to cut more strength coaches because like they got to obviously like
They want to have the money saved.
salaries. It's like you kind of see that with like professional baseball where after COVID they cut like 2 affiliates because they were being forced to pay the minor leaguers more. So they're like, all right, we're going to pay you more, but like we're also just going to cut 60 of you. And now there's 60 less players. So like it's better for the guys that are in it. But like I think overall that should be really good though.
Yeah, there's almost like a double-edged sword. And French, I think we talked about this on our AI episode. Does that remove jobs from sports scientists in a sense? It's a really good intention, but is there negative ramifications that can come with it? And are we, as the affected population, quote unquote, are we okay with that? And do you trust yourself in your ability that you won't be the one that's cut in a sense? But hopefully it turns out to be a good thing. I think it is a very well-intentioned kind of act within the government. So depending on what happens with it, it possibly could lead to higher salaries, or we just now all of our salaries have a classification code, and then that's that.
Yeah, hopefully it turns out good, because I also think like I honestly feel like sometimes strength coaches like try to like, because the generally like overall like underpaid, the whole thing is like underpaid, overworked. And I think a lot of times like, yes, that is true, but also like we've talked about like that people like when we visited West Side, they said like a really like impactful line. They're like, I think strength coaches are like their own like worst enemies. Like we're like complain a lot about that stuff, but then quick to like throw one another under the bus because we don't agree with like how they write like programs and stuff like that. So like just I think this is like a good opportunity to
band together.
It's a good opportunity. Yeah, exactly. Like a good opportunity. Like it's easy to want to try to find stuff to complain about when you think you're getting the short end of the stick, but here's an opportunity to hopefully stop that. So hopefully those people will kind of put their money where their mouth is, and if not, then that's on them. So, but
maybe it'll reduce some of the crabs in a bucket mentality and clawing each other down.
Yeah, and like I don't think it's definitely not everybody, but like I do think that is like it's true. It's like interesting how like people could like complain about that, but then they'll complain about stuff, but then when they do have an opportunity to like make things better, it's like they almost want to be like, well, then I won't have anything to complain about. Like then what will I complain about? It's like,
I'm not happy unless I'm unhappy.
Yeah, it's yeah, it is. So we'll see.
Rooney, we appreciate your time, but before we go, there's always one question we love to ask every coach that hops on. Coop gave us a couple good ones too, but what is your hottest take when it comes to S&C? Whether it's about coaching, the industry, whatever it is, what's one take that you feel like someone might crucify you for, but you want to stand your ground on it?
That's a good one right there. So I'll go. French knows me. I'm a little more shroomy of a thinker here, so I'll go a little more out of the box, but could extend beyond the level of S&C. But I think like the quote. So I was told this when I was at Driveline too, but like it's goes in two ways. So it's like everything is eyewash until it works, and then it's also like everything matters just as much as nothing matters. So like everything is eyewash until it works. Like think about you go back 100 years ago and you dropped a 1080 into training. There were absolutely going to be coaches that wrote you off because you're using this weird training tool that no one's ever seen, or you're doing movements that no one's ever seen. And it's like, why, like, just because of something looks, everyone's going to look at it and be like, that's complete eyewash. But like, hey, maybe it works for that guy. Or like the everything that matters just as much as nothing matters is like, I just think that like at the end of the day, people get so gung ho on all the details within a program. And it's like, I don't know if that matters. Like we said, like the training environment, like I could spend an hour writing the most perfect program in the world. You could go to ChatGPT, give me this program, slap it right on there. You have an elite training group. I don't. You're going to get way better results probably. And it's like, I just think like at the end of the day, like I think people just like really paralyze themselves by like the fine, minute details. And it's like, I don't know if this matters as much as like just getting consistent work done every day. And that's where like, I think at the end of the day with S&C, like consistency over time is what's going to win. It's not in the minute details of sets, reps, and exercises and intensities and rest periods and all that. That stuff matters. I just don't think it matters as much as people think it does at the end of the day. And I think just like consistency, discipline, and like a good training environment is going to win out over time.
That's beautiful. I love it. I love it. Get a couple reviews in here. French, you want to start?
Yeah. All right. So this C4 fruit punch. It is very similar. Like if you've ever had the C4 like pre-workout powder fruit punch, probably the first ever pre-workout you ever had. It's that carbonated in a can. So solid. Like I said, not a huge fan of like fruit punch flavors in energy drinks, but good. I mean, 300 milligrams of caffeine, that'll get you riled up. It was a little bit pricey. Picked it up at a Circle K. The can does look sick. I do like the aesthetics on here. But overall, I think the flavor for me is going to do it in a little bit. I'm going to go 6.4. I'll pick it up again in a pinch, but definitely not one of my favorite C4 flavors. Just like the flavor, and it was like $4, so it's a little bit steep. I'm looking for more closer to like a $3.49 type of deal on that. So I'm being harsh, but it's because I love you, C4. It's not because I hate you.
The C4 Mango Fuego. I'm a little biased towards this one. This is one of my thrower's favorite flavors. She directly attributes the Mango Fuego to her hitting a PR and winning the indoor weight throw. So I'm a little biased. I will be completely clear on that. I think the can is great. I love like the mango on the side. It's something different. C4 is typically going to show a little bit more on like I don't want to say like militaristic kind of style, but make it look like it's out of a lab versus like let's throw some vines and things like that. So it's off the beaten path of their typical one. It's the C4 formula we know we love. It's one of the only cans that actually puts beta alanine in the can, which I think is great. It's mango, maybe a hint of pineapple, but then you have like that tahini, like cherry, or not cherry, like chili lime flash at the end. I think you put this in a glass of ice and you give it a tahini rim. That would be unbelievable. Give me a. I don't even like the beach. Put me on the beach. Put that in a glass. I'm hanging out, man. I'm gonna go 7.6, which around here that's a strong score. We're typically not big. damn good. And we're typically not mango people. So I think that's a soup. That might be one of the best mango flavors I've had. Rooney, take us home on this.
The Alani blueberry, or blue slush, sorry. I'll give it a 5.1, but I'll explain. It's not necessarily that it's bad. Really good flavor. I will say flavor is positive. I'm a big fan of the slush line. What I did not love is the absence of nootropics from Alani. That's why I love the bums, as French knows. But pretty solid. I gave it a 5.1 because at the end of the day, if it was in the gas station, I would purchase it again if I was, back against the wall. Limited options there, but certainly would not be amongst my top choices in terms of how it's hitting. I will give it a little upgrade because it was free 99 from old Scuba Steve's fridge back at the clubhouse. So shout out Scuba Steve for providing me Alani's, and a free energy drink I will take over a energy drink I got to pay for almost any day of the week. But that's me being cheap. But yeah, it was solid. I would drink it again, but it's not something I would go out and probably purchase on my own. I don't know if they're marketing it towards strength coaches. I think they're targeting the white female population a little bit more with the Alani's. But
targeted marketing.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're doing their job. Cans real like cartoony and bubbly. I'm getting whited out here, but you got your ice cream cones on there and your slushies, so it's all right.
Man, that's a hell of a review. That's a detailed review. I love that.
I'm all in on that. We got a true connoisseur.
Yeah.
French, you want to take us home here?
Yeah, let's do it. Folks, as always, we appreciate you for tuning in. Rooney, thanks for your time. Make sure to tap in whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Make sure to subscribe or follow the show. It really helps us with the algorithm. Leave a review if you did enjoy it. Recommend it to a friend. BevBoys.tv is our Instagram. Past, future, present clips. Our personals are always associated with those if you want to check out some training footage. Rooney, you want to plug your socials? Anything you want to, where people can find you?
Yeah, so I'm more active on Instagram. It's at Rooney Performance. I do have a X account as well that I don't use as often, but I probably have a lot of old stuff there, and then that's where I posted that spreadsheet I was talking about. That's at Connor Rooney 23.
Yeah, so definitely go check.
Follow the at Dungeon Rats on Instagram as well for the training community.
And we will link the Dungeon Rats training underneath the video here. So if you guys want to train with the rats themselves, we'll put that link in the description so that way you can get your program and hop in with the crew. Training partners not provided.
Yeah, you got to find that on your own, only virtually. Yeah, so we'll link all that. Yep. So we'll link all that in the show notes. Make sure you give Rooney a follow. Check out the Dungeon Rats. BevBoys.com if you want to support the boys with some t-shirts or some merch. And we will see you guys next time. Peace.